North wall. I hauled the crate off the flatbed in the blue hour before the yard lights kicked themselves awake. Frost had traced the tarps into fish-scale patterns. Breath hung in front of me like cheap insulation. I got the pallet straps loose by feel. The label on the side said prefab 8x16, 2 half kits. Another had stuttered black type like a stamp that skipped 7th wall. It didn't come with a booklet, and I didn't look too hard for one. The county office kept short hours, and the lady at the window had already told me the return policy on surplus. If it hits your truck, it's yours. By the time the sun cleared the high piles, refrigerator doors on one stack, fenders on another, a ribbon of copper like a frozen stream, the deck blocks were set and the skids lined up. OSB sheets smell sweet if you don't think about it. Glue and wood the way a cough drop pretends to be cherry. The screws were all star heads, big orange bag, labels rubbed off. A space heater whined in the skeleton of a room. I put my mug on the counter slab, a slab if you squinted, and left a little wet circle where the coffee kissed the wood, and decided there was no point trying to keep it pretty. Nobody else was going to see it. When you build in a place that already looks built, you don't draw much notice. The yard had everything: cold stoves with a little grease still in their throats, bed frames in bundles like ribs, coils of hose, a bulldozer blade that had given up trying a row of printers so grey the buttons looked like pills. Lowell let me set up the cabin behind the chain link where the cedars get ragged. He said it was like having a night guard who paid for the privilege. I told him I'd watch the motion lights and his dog, if the dog ever came back. I got the 4 walls up and the halves married. The heater warmed its own air and pushed it back at me until my eyes were dry. The hum of the old fridge IOD pulled from the brown appliances pile rode a half step too sharp, like it wanted to be a different fridge in a different key. There was a coil burn on the counter you only saw if the sun hit wrong. The floor rug was a carpet remnant with the edge stapled under so it pretend breathed when you walked. The 7th wall had the same finish as the rest. It leaned in the corner like a roadside cross before it finds its ditch. I tapped it with my knuckle, and something inside it counted back, a click like a cheap metronome watered down. It might have been the screws in the plastic bag rubbing each other. It might have been me hearing what I wanted to hear. There are days it feels like you can stop yourself from doing the thing that makes the next thing worse. I hung it last. You learn a lot about straight lines and forgiveness when you try to coax a square out of a kit they sold because it wasn't a T-square. I pried and pulled and backed out screws and drove them again until the seams sat down and the gaps behaved. I put the curve of my shoulder into the stud and made the edge of the 7th wall kiss the corner it didn't T-want. The click inside the panel ran itself out or fell asleep. By the time the heater had burned, the frost smell out of the air, the whole place looked like a diagram of a small life with missing labels. It was a place to set a mug, lay down a shirt, listen to air. The routine started simple. I walked a line to the kitchenette to see if the tap was going to be stubborn or helpful. I turned the faucet, and it acted like it was being asked to sing. Hose a water taste in a tin cup. I walked to the short hall and back to the living room to see what kind of distance ID built myself. I wasn't looking for anything except the quiet work gives you when the work is done, and there is no one to tell you whether you did it right. I like quiet that belongs to me. I like being tired enough that sleep is a thing your body falls into like a chair. When I came back around to the living room, the wet ring was still there, and the counter held a coil burn I didn't remember making, and the fridge kept on humming a half step wrong. The rug gave the same bit under my heel, and the heater talked to itself in clicks like a thin man cracking his knuckles. I thought I'd got turned around. The window showed chain link and a stack of washer drums that looked like drums, which felt right. I walked the line again because sometimes you retrace without thinking. Kitchenette, short hall, living room. I passed my mug and then I passed it again, and the second time the wet ring on the wood was different, a longer halo starting to drift out like it was thinking about leaving. The third time I stopped because it felt like how a treadmill warms up a little under you if you keep at it. You can tell when a floor remembers your footsteps. I palmed the counter where the coil had kissed it in some other life and told myself, shut off the heater and go check the lot lights. You're cooked and you'll keep cooking if you sit here. The light over the door hissed and the tube flared a pale pink before it found itself. A moth the size of a grape erranded its one dumb errand. I turned the knob to air the place out and the latch slipped and spoke in the little voice all latches have. The one that says, this time I'm going to behave, and then I won't. Outside was the yard, the way it goes soft at the edges when cold squeezes the sound out of it. The piles turned into shapes of piles. There was a fork in the bare track where folks cut the corner in their trucks, and somebody's tire had gone its own way. The night shifted in its coat and settled deeper on the cedar tops. I breathed and felt the breath sit in front of me like it didn't want to be used. The heater spit one more click, and the fridge kept singing the note it liked. I don't know when I got the idea to mark the wall. The north side felt like north, the way a pocket feels like the pocket you always put your keys in. The county office only cared about the setbacks. It didn't care where I kept my receipts. I keep receipts the way a squirrel keeps unpromising nuts. Every now and then you want to prove something happened, and the only one who is going to swear to it is a slip with a stamp. I taped the one from the county surplus store on the north wall. I taped the one from Ace, where I thought I bought the wrong screws, but they bit the wood the way a bad dog does, and I kept them. I taped the one for coffee and fuel from the highway station with the ice that never seems to melt because they leave it sleeping in the big cooler. I told myself I wanted all that up there so I could look at it and remind myself what I spent when I started wishing for something that wasn't tea on any list. But I knew there's another kind of keeping, where you put a thing where it can see you, and then it does. Sleep skated in front of me at a distance you can always measure but never fix with an arm. I lay on the narrow bed and watched the line of light under the door breathe. The heater ran until it didn't tee, and the silence that came after it was a tight silence that holds a hand over your mouth. I rolled onto my stomach because sometimes that tricks your mind into turning off, the way turning a picture on a wall can make it shut its own eyes. The latch whispered. I didn't get up. There are sounds you don't get up for, because if you get up now, you will get up for all of them until dawn, and there won't be any dawn left for you. Something didn't change, and in not changing it changed everything. Cold moved under the door in a stand-up way you can mistake for the one the heater leaves behind when it sets down. I sat up, and the room leaned a little like a boat that wants to see who's in it. The door was ajar like a mouth with a story it wanted to tell, and inside the mouth wasn't to my yard. The chain link breathed different. The track opened out onto a street with angled parking spots, and a pump-handle streetlight and a fender I never owned scraped the concrete too close, chalked with somebody else's paint. The air had the wet salt of plow wash and the old beer carpet smell bars have if you go in on a Tuesday morning. There was the paper-twined feel of ticket stubs in a hand, the way they erase your fingerprint. I could hear the high chatter of a neon that hasn't convinced itself to be a sign yet. I didn't say anything because the words sitting nearest in my mouth were the kind the body uses to make a thing smaller, and it wasn't small. I took a step, and the rug moved the way a rug moves when it knows where you were going and isn't going to argue. I shut the door. The latch cried, and then excused itself. The heater woke and tried to be the only sound in the world. The fridge carried on with its wrong note. Next morning, the chain link was back where chain link goes. Frost drew a second set of fish scales over the top. The seventh wall made no sound when I put my ear to it. I could feel the place settling into itself around me, like the way your clothes learn your shoulder blades and your belt buckle. Work becomes the thing you do to keep another thing from becoming the only thing. Lowell came by around 11 with a cardboard box full of hard candy from a supply store he got a handshake with. You put this out where you can see it and you will eat 3, and that's plenty, he said. and set it on the counter. He had oil on his palm that had gone into his lines the way rain takes whatever path looks quick. "Your corner looks square," he said. "Close enough," I said. "I got that heater to behave. Fridge needs a tune." "You don't tune fridges," he said. "Then this one needs a sermon." I ran a knuckle on the front, where someone had scratched the paint with a can opener kind of mind. "You see that pallet with the extra piece? He looked at the half wall where the seventh leaned yesterday and nodded his head like a thought moved in there and then moved back out. "Bonus," he said. "Sometimes you get lucky and the guy loading your order gets bored and makes you a saint." "It fit," I said. "Good," he said. "You'll make better coffee if this corner stays warmer. You staying nights a while? County S got the transfer station on half day this week, and folks get creative when that happens." "I'll be here," I said. He scratched his jaw where the whiskers go pale. He looked like a man who heard the same few stories, walking around under different clothes. He picked up 2 pieces of hard candy and left them on the counter like a tip and a threat. "Holler if the gate camera gets funny," he said. The door took some of him with it when he left, the heat shape we all have. By afternoon, the wind had gone to work. The cedars took it on the chin, the way they've been taking it since the county needed a place to put what it didn't want to see anymore. I did a circuit of the fence. A plastic blind slat tumbled along the track with all the purpose the day had. I found a pair of gloves by the post where people toss things out of trucks when they think they re-still in their trucks. I blessed them and put them in the bin with all the others. You never have enough gloves until you do, and then they blow away. When I turned back to the cabin, the door was standing open a clean inch. I told myself a lot of things walked there. The wind, the roar of Lowell's yellow forklift, the way air travels around corners. I shut the door and felt it latch. I put my hand on the panel to feel where the lines of the wall stood behind the drywall and added a screw where a screw belonged. The stud behind it ticked one time, like a pen dropping on a desk in another room. That night, the door unlatched again. There's a tone a latch takes on the second try when it wants you to know it tried. The cold had rearranged its furniture outside. The lot got wider, and the receivers dumped on the edges had turned into something like rounded boulders. The scene was another where my shoulder felt the weight of a hand. It didn't want to remember a foreman's palm, heavy as a textbook on a desk, the smell of cardboard, and the dust that lives in the corner of a warehouse calendar. There's a tone a man takes when he asks not firing you, but a decision is going to happen, and it one to need your vote. That hand was on my shoulder in that light forever, and my mouth, the mouth I've been carrying around all my years, said something like brave and wrong at once. I shut the door. The heater woke and pretended nothing had happened. The fridge went on with its note like a kitchen singer who never learns new songs. I lay on my side and watched the light under the door be a level on a wall. I counted breaths the way you make a deal with sleep and then break it. Somewhere inside the studs, the seventh wall especially, I heard a tiny, polite tap shelf itself, and then go quiet. I started taping more receipts to the north wall because it felt like I had a job. And the job was this: make a record of what arrived because you don't get to pick what leaves. I put up the slip from the U-Haul place where a kid with the kind of beard that looks like it, trying to be serious, had said, "And you will bring it back with 3/8?" And I had said I will, and then I didn't a T. I put up the receipt with the 5 gallons of paint I tried on the rental back room that never dried right and bubbled like it had secrets trapped under it. I didn't have the one for what you can't buy anyplace anymore. I put up a napkin with a number I never called. Sleep works best when your mind feels like it built its own small fence. Mine didn't. Nights made themselves long and then longer. I drank coffee that smelled like a paper bag and ate hard candy because people said it speeds the mouth and slows the rest. I walked from living room to kitchenette to short hall and back, and sometimes it was a distance, and sometimes it was the same floor over and over like a photocopy burned a shade darker until it goes black. By the end of the week, the rooms looped if I let them. I could get from the bed to the sink and back and pass my own cup twice. The fridge flickered between hum and nothing in a way that felt like a losing argument where you keep thinking of what you should have said after it ends. The rug learned to warm under my feet the way a belt warms to a pulley. I told myself it was winter working the wood. I told myself any place bends when you sleep in it enough. The door kept opening late, never at a number I could make a superstition from. And the outside, through that slice of air, kept showing me places I didn't ask for. Once it was a kitchen big enough to pace with a window that held out 2 backyards stitched together by a tired fence and a phone on the wall with a red light aching under a voicemail. ID let die. The air in that one was old coffee and a shirt closet. Another time, it was new tile on a bank floor light tearing itself into clean strips, and a man in a blazer asking me about income like it was a thing you set on the counter and pointed to with a pen. I started to see how this wanted to run me. There's a way a machine waits for you to learn its rhythm, and when you learn it, you don't get to unlearn it without breaking something. I had that taped wall with all my little proofs. I had a heater that clicked in beats a little man could count. I had a fridge that didn't love its own song. I had a door that liked late. It's not much to make a plan with, but you fish with water that's in the river. I picked the receipt I hated least and put my fingertip on it. It was a slip from an auto glass place where a kid had told me they could fill a chip but not a spider, and I'd told him I wasn't that kind of lucky. I told myself, all right, we drive with a star in our sight and that makes it ours. I whispered because that's how you tell the truth to a thing you are not sure can hear you. I said, I want one, not all. I said, I want to fix one thing. I said, you can take a matching piece and put it wherever you put those. I'm not going to say I knew the rules then. I'm going to say I knew they existed because I could feel the room hold its breath the way a person does when the person you were married to taps a ring on the table and asks without asking. The heater cut off like a man in the next room, deciding to hold a sneeze. The fridge landed on its right note for a second, and the second felt like a minute. I slid down the wall. I don't remember sleeping. I remember something like rest. In the morning, there was no star in the glass. The windshield was so plain, it looked wrong for the truck it belonged to. It had the look of a thing you get after you forget to get it. I went out to the lot and put my palm on the wiper as if I could feel the absence of a chip through the rubber. For a long time, I stood and made myself not turn all the way around, because I could feel the part of my head that hadn't been interested in the sky in a while wake and look up like it was going to find something missing. I turned slow. The high piles still held, the cedar tops still bent. The camera on the gate sat in its little metal hat like a bird. A feeling the size of a spoonful made a new place under my ribs and sat there with its hands on its knees. The door to the cabin was latched. The space heater made itself useful. None of that meant anything about the thing I traded. The first day you see a trade pay off, you think things about momentum and a run of luck. You think a lot about lines finally getting to be straight. You don't think about the back of the receipt. That evening, the door opened to a place I didn't recognize right away until the smell came. It was a kind of soap you only get to know if your life turns left in a particular hallway. The outside of my cabin had a gloss to it. The track had a shine like a concrete floor you're supposed to keep quiet on. There was a laughter that hadn't tuned itself into any of my rooms in a long time, and I realized it was the laugh a machine makes in the pause between a wash and a rinse, the happy a good pump gives itself when it has all night. Somewhere inside that scene, someone cleared a throat that had to be cleared and then did it again and then didn't tea. I shut the door and made dinner and chewed slowly and wrote a thing in the paper I keep around for when somebody asks what you did and how long it took, and I don't have a pretty line to hand them. I didn't sleep, and then I slept because there wasn't any other thing to do with the dark, and that's how your body gets you around a corner. I went to the county office on a Thursday when the stones got soft from a sun that couldn't decide if it was a sun. I stood under the humming lights in front of the window, where the lady has big hair that looks like it belongs on a party, and asked if there was a booklet for surplus prefab 8x16 cabins. "Honey, that series never had a booklet," she said. "It had 3 paragraphs and a line drawing, and those paragraphs were wrong." I nodded, because you nod when a person tells you a thing you already suspected. "Permits are posted under the laminated page," she said. "If you click on the wrong link, the right link will show itself, and you can tell because the form number starts with an 8. The toner in their machine smelled like warm pennies. I copied the code the laminated page offered and pressed it on a slip sized for a pocket and taped that slip to the north wall when I got home. I started choosing my trades like a man chooses which ache to rub. I picked one at a time, a voicemail I wanted to have listened to all the way through, a Saturday morning I'd worked instead of showing up somewhere I said I would, a radiator leak I defed water to like it was a pet until the day it wasn't a tea. I asked for them in the smallest words I could find and left the heater running because it made the place feel like it could hear me. The room got used to me. It learned my walks and ate them and made more of itself from my steps. It took 4 days to notice the way the yard went thinner in the corners. Not gone, just a step to the left of the heavy it used to carry. The tarps over the loads didn't snap with the same satisfying pop. The forklift sounded like 2 different men pretending to be one. Lowell didn't come around with candy. The candy on my counter didn't go anywhere. I broke one piece on my molar like a thing that had been sitting in a jar on a shelf in a store the city forgot. I changed what I taped on the wall. Along with the slips and the ticket stubs and the napkin, I taped the little notes I'd leave for myself when I had to remember a number, a time, a name. Names feel different when you make them flat. Some of them went light at the edges, like they were being erased by the weather in the room. I added a piece of Painter S tape to each one and wrote a word on that tape that wasn't the word on the slip. I called that word the trade. It made a shape I could see. The door opened to my excess kitchen with a soft sound, like the way her hair made noise on a cotton pillowcase when she slept. It opened to a hallway outside a bank of elevator buttons where a little boy pressed his finger to every floor like a hymn while his mother told him to quit it, and he said, "Why? You said push this one and I am," which was a kind of logic you can't argue with unless you are unkind. It opened to a metal door with the glass clouded by wire and a sign on paper that said use other entrance, while the other entrance wore the same sign. The air from those places carried in, and it laid itself down on my rug and stayed for a while. It seeped under the other door and into the part of the yard that used to own its own smell. The county put out an advisory about wind shear over the highway because a semi had tipped 2 days back, and then a man with a truck full of ladders tried to go under and peeled his morning off like a label, and nobody wanted 3 more of those. The transfer station went to appointment only. The lady at the office said it on the phone like she was reading the words the exact way they were written, and the words didn't give her anything extra to add. That meant nobody was going to come into the yard to leave their regrets where we could find them, and when people can do the thing they want to do the way they want to do it, they climb the fence or they throw farther. Lowell called to say he was going to keep the gate chained and go see his sister in Gray come back Monday. "Sit on the camera, will you?" he said. "Shoot me a text if somebody tries to pry the little hat off. We get kids think that hat is funny." "I'll sit on it," I said. He was already in the middle of something else when he said good, and the line went vacant, and I stood with the phone at my ear and heard the building settle. Nights took on a texture. The heater's click formed a pattern I could ride or fight. The fridge hum went less wrong on some hours and more wrong on others. The screws in the 7th wall named themselves to me by the shape of my screwdriver as I checked them. Between the days and the evenings and the Doris poor manners, I started to notice an ache in my jaw, like I'd been catching myself from saying a thing I shouldn't say, and every time I stopped the words, they had to go somewhere, and they went into the muscles by my teeth. It felt fair, the first trades. You ask to rewind a small thing, and the world takes a small thing you done it inspect with a flashlight every morning. You give up a nickname a guy at the parts store used to have for you, and you get back the set of socket wrenches you let borrow themselves until they lived across town. You give up the way a cashier somewhere used to draw a little smiley face in the 2 zeros when your total had 2 zeros, and you get a call that doesn't cut out when you say the number on the back of the card. Small for small. I stacked that logic and lived under it. One night I picked something that wasn't small. The door had opened late to a parking lot under sodium lights where the window of a place with tables for 2 glowed napkin white. A girl in a black apron turned a chair upside down to sit on it like it was a friend. I knew the chair because my own hand had turned it once in a hurry and put a scratch on the rung I'd promised to fix. I picked a receipt from the wall and touched the corner where the ink had bled a little, like letters do when the paper got wet. I said that one. The room took a breath and tightened its belt and held it. I set my coffee down because my hand couldn't remember how to be at the right temperature, and I didn't want to drop anything that was mine. The trade looked different. I woke with the heater holding silent, and the fridge eating its note in long chews, and the light under the door flat as a nailhead. Outside the yard had that polished look again, that floor-waxed shine that makes your shoes learn new words. The fence was gone for 2 spans. The world beyond didn't know it had never had a fence. The pile where the washer drums went had rearranged without needing a man or a machine. A path ran through the cedars, like a dog had made it over and over for years. I followed that path and found a ditch that had eaten a lot of water in its day, and a little footbridge that knew people smaller than me and lighter than my morning. My head said, "You never walked here." My feet said, "You did." I stood on the bridge and tested the boards with my toe in the way you test something you do not want to break, but you need to know if it holds. The plank said it held. A truck went by on the other side of the trees, on a road that wasn't Timai Road, and a horn barked once like it had things to say, but not to me. I went back and shut the door even though it was already shut. You can shut a shut door when you want to explain something to it. That trade woke something I wanted to keep asleep. I ate bread I didn't remember buying. The bed bent different under me. The bag of screws lay where I left it, but it had one of those zipper tops the fancy bags have, and I would have sworn to anybody in a church that it had been a rip bag. There are little faiths you keep about the world, and one of mine was whether a bag opens by ripping or with a little zip. The room gets those wrong, and you start counting other things. I didn't tape any more receipts that day. I stared at the north wall until the wall turned into the things taped to it, and then those turned into the day again, and the heater sneezed a click. The door stayed put. The latch daydreamed. The yard out the window showed a forklift track going the long way, like someone had been careful where they never bother being careful because they know they can crush whatever they want. I told myself maybe I forgot the fence falling, maybe I moved it in my sleep. Maybe Lowell came and did a thing and forgot to call. The phone lay on the counter and looked like a fish. When I slept that night, the door opened on a hospital hallway, and the hallway had the kind of shine that says, one man mops, and another man comes behind him with a buffer, and they talk while they do it, and the talk is the only thing that stays. The clock on the wall said a time I won't write here. The air had that alcohol and plastic smell that isn't T anyone IS, and I heard a machine make a breath and give it back. I knew I should close the door. I knew I was going to pick something from the wall and say, take it, and bring me a different end of the day. Bring me a little move to the left. Bring me 1 minute with a chair upside down on a table and the floor waiting for a mop. I closed the door. I stood with my palm against the seventh wall and felt 3 screws quiet under my hand. I didn't make that trade. The county office put out a second advisory about the wind, and then a third. When the first 2 didn't stop the same guy from cutting the same corner in the same place. A brownout rolled through the industrial park the yard used to belong to before they stopped calling it that and started calling it mixed use. The forklift sat at angles too deliberate to be sleep. The ice machines at the gas stations groaned when they started back up and spat out bricks the way a bad laugh coughs. Our camera at the gate blanked for a second and introduced itself to the world again and forgot where it had been. I texted Lowell to say kids can take a metal hat off with a broom handle if they have the devil and a friend. He texted back a picture of a bright pie on a plate, and it landed like a postcard from a town that had all its chairs. I did the routine that had become my job. I walked the line from the living room to the kitchenette to the short hall and back, and watched the world try to hold a shape under me. The loop was there if I let it be there. It helped if I made myself stop before I got all the way back to where I started. I took off the rug one day so my feet would stop helping the floor remember. The staples left little holes like periods. The subfloor had a smear where something had been dropped and picked up and not wiped because nobody was looking. I sanded that smear and vacuumed it, and the vacuum spit 3 grit noises loud enough to call themselves accomplishments. The heater had started to show its age. The element clicked and then paused between one glow and the next, like it was sorting long feelings in a short window. The fridge sputtered and landed on the right note, and then missed it and shrugged. The seventh wall felt warmer to the touch, though everything else ran under what the meter would call comfortable. Inside the panel, the little ticking came back sometimes, not steady enough to use, steady enough to notice. I made a rule in the morning and broke it by evening. The rule was this: no more trades for 3 days. The evening told me a different story, because the door gave me one. It opened at my bed's knee to a dirt road with 2 mails boxes at dumb angles, their flags asleep. A dog with a black face and a white chest sat polite as a churchgoer by the ditch, waiting to see if I was worth standing for. I could smell clay that had been new once, and then rained on, and then sun-dried into something that goes to dust if you look at it wrong. In that air hung a voice I'd thrown away like a cup because I thought I didn't need it anymore. And the voice had a small laugh in it that could still push a button in me I hated. I put my palm on a slip that knew the shape of my palm and told the room what I wanted. I woke with the heater happy. It crackled and glowed and fed the corners. The door bumped and then closed itself, a trick it had never managed. The north wall made a sound paper makes when you add one more paper to a stack, and the stack hides it. Out the window, the stack of washer drums had a ladder leaned against it, and a pair of gloves hung on a rung, like somebody had been a gentleman about taking a leak. I walked a small distance and didn't pass the same cup twice. I went to the truck and checked the glove box for a map I used to keep. The glove box was a new glove box. It smelled like nothing, which is what the world smells like before people. I didn't find the thing I traded for until I went to my pocket for a key that felt somehow longer and thinner than the key I'd always used. Memory is a liar when it needs to be. The lock turned anyway. I stood with the key cold in my hand and listened to the heater mutter. The wind had taught the cedars a different word. It's a feeling like putting on a jacket you haven't worn since last winter and finding a phone number in the pocket and not knowing which side of that you want it to be. The county isn't a person, but the county can move like one when it puts out a closure. They closed a road I used to get to a store where a woman with grey hair and a lanyard knows me enough to say, "How about that weather?" and leave it alone. The detour signs were small, and one had fallen over and lay facing up like the dead do. I had to go through blocks I don't use. A man in a lawn chair stared at his own house like it was saying something about him, and he didn't know which part to argue with. When I came back and parked by the fence, I let the gate chain fall and miss my hand, and it made a sound I'd heard before, but not there. There's a point where you know the thing and you keep talking around it because you think if you keep talking long enough, you're going to say something else by accident. Whatever I was doing in that room with the north wall and the taped proofs wasn't it just putting my day on a line and tugging at ends. The room wanted something out of me, and the trades weren't trades anymore. They were the way the room breathed. With each piece I gave up, the candies place on the counter, the scratch on a rung at a place with tables for two, the name of an exit, and what was around it. The room took to itself the right to show me. Given that right, it kept showing. There was the night it opened on my father's old truck, the one with the bedliner that peeled off like sunburn. The funnel we kept for gas rested on the tailgate, a shape so ordinary it didn't belong to memory anymore. Behind that was the shop, with the tools we stacked the way poor people stack hope. Careful, clean, always one piece shy of a set. I closed the door and did not touch the wall, and still morning took a thing from me. I don't know which, only that when I looked out my window, the stack of bed frames had collapsed into a new geometry that did not view me as a person. And the camera at the gate tilted its little hat and would not tilt it back. I could have unmounted the seventh wall. I thought about it. You back out screws, and you keep track of them in a mug you don't know to use for anything else, because it will never not taste like metal. You lift the panel, and you lay it down like a sleeping man on a cot. You put your palm to the studs and tell them to be what they were made to be. Blunt lines that keep a square from turning oval under weather. I got the screwdriver. I took 3 screws and put them in the mug and sipped water out of a bottle because I didn't want to set another taste in that mug. The panel lifted an inch and spoke through my hands with the voice of 1,000 horses, dragging a thing the road will not hand over. The 7th wall told me the shape of the room depended on more than the screws. I lowered it because a wall can beg and be a bully at the same time. It made me a different offer. On an afternoon sun made fat by late winter, bottomed out in the needles, and the heater went quiet under the day's help. I sat on the floor with my back against the taped wall and the 7th to my left, and thought in the slow way a man thinks when he doesn't have to answer anyone. I picked a slip at random. It was the one from the power company with the little graph that shows you how you used it wrong, and how if you were not you would have used it right. On the tape I'd written the word grace, because grace is one of those lies small enough to fit in a sleeve. I took the tape off the slip and stuck it to my knee. I put the slip back and put a different piece of tape on it and wrote the word door. Night came with a whimper and a hard shoulder. The door unlatched and showed me nothing. Yard at night, piles heavy, a moth that found my light no matter where it started from. I looked at the word on my knee. I felt too foolish to say it out loud. I said it anyway, quiet enough I could take it back if nobody heard it. In the morning I thought I was going to throw up, and then I didn't. The heater felt like the sun. The fridge had picked a new song and played that one to death. The door stuck, good stuck, paint on wood stuck, and the latch did its best, and then asked me for my right shoulder. I gave it my shoulder and then stepped outside because I had to, and because that is how you learn what the word costs. The fence was gone. The yard was a field that had never had a pile. A little 2-lane cut across it with a stutter like a road made by men who thought this would be a farm, and it wasn't tea. Trees I didn't know stood where the cedar stood. The sky was a different white, like a light bulb, in a room that belongs to someone who keeps the receipts in a shoebox. I do not know where they sit. I turned back, and the cabin sat like cabins sit. The OSB was OSB. The 7th wall waited its corner. All right, I said. I think I understand you. I touched a slip with the pad of my finger, the one from the day my landlord was trying to sell back when I still rented. And he needed the place to look like no one lived in it because people don't to buy houses with a life inside them. I said, I want that day, not forever. One day where the door opens and what I see isn't a hand on my shoulder or a voicemail red light or a hallway with a shine only a machine can make. A Sunday, a room that's sorry if you scuff it, a person I should have been better to. The room listened. I know how that sounds and I know how those words make a shape in your head, but I'm not pretending it was a voice or a face. It was a change in the way the heater clicked and the way the seventh wall absorbed it, the way the paper on the north side took the air up in 100 thin lungs. The trade is just the deal. What you offer for what you think you want and what you lose without accounting for it. It gave me that Sunday for an afternoon whole enough. I didn't touch anything. I sat where I would have sat. Then a fold-out chair, someone else bought a plate in my lap with chicken on it that you eat with your fingers because a fork lies about a lot more than you think. I stared at the profile of a person talking to another person and did not speak because the only words a man should say sometimes are the ones that blow a strong thing over. The air from that door was summer sweet with citronella and dish soap. For the first time since I de-set the space heater on the slab, I did not hear it try to be the only thing I needed. I went to the north wall in the evening and put my head on it like I was resting while I thought. I said thank you to the room, because there are times when a thank you helps you stay a person. I woke and the yard had been eaten to roots. The camera had no hat. The forklift had never had a cage. Lowell did not exist the way men exist. He existed the way stories people tell about a guy who used to own a yard exist, which is to say loosely and with hand gestures. My truck held a key that did not belong to a lock it knew. The gas station at the road that used to be my road had no woman with a lanyard, and the machine that took my card asked me a question about rewards I had no answer for. The room had removed the idea of returns and then set it down somewhere I can reach. You put seventh wall up and you make a shape you cannot carry out once it has learned the shape of you. The trades didn't bring me anything closer to me than the moment I stood in wishing for a different day than the one I could name. The cabin turned all my exercises into its breath. The world outside made itself new in little spins like a drunk man telling a true story in a wrong key. I started writing on the wall, not a confession, not a list. Instructions for someone who isn't going to come. I looked at the taped proofs until I knew where north was, even if they all fell. I said in the smallest letters I have, wedge the door. Use a piece from the pallet. Brace it. Do not stand in the loop and walk until the floor warms, because when you do, you become the loop's food. Turn the fridge off and then on again, and do not wait for it to find the right note, because the right note is not what you think. Tape the receipts, all of them, because paper is the only thing that will remember for you when you decide to forget. Choose one thing to fix and say it out loud, and give it the respect you should have given the thing when it was alive. Never pick two. On the fifth night, the door failed to open at all. It was that paint-on-wood stick multiplied by pain and a stubborn that wasn't human. I stood there with my shoulder at the world and knew I had a final trade to make, because the room would keep taking my small things and my right names until I was the part of the house that one to look you in the eye. I touched a slip and didn't read it because reading it makes it smaller, and this had gone far past small. I said, take what you want and give me back the thing I shouldn't have taken. I held my palm against the seventh wall where it knew me best, by the screws I'd checked 100 times with a care I never gave anything I loved. I woke standing. My hand was on a panel that matched my hand. The heater was silent because morning didn't need it. The fridge sat and adjusted to a noise you get in spring when you forget to close a window, birds that practice before they mean it. The door stood open. Outside was my gate with its chain, and the camera with its little metal hat, and the washer drums in their correct stack, and the path made by 2 tires that belonged to a guy I know, me parking where I've always parked. My truck key turned in the lock it had been making out with for years. On the north wall, the slips lay flat and quiet, and one was gone. I ran my hand over the place where it wasn't. The paint there hadn't faded lighter than the places where tape had not been. The wall had been like that forever. I made coffee and felt the coffee be coffee. I took my cup to the counter where the coil had kissed it and set it in the wet ring I leave every time, and I watched that widen like a thing good enough to lose its shape. I walked to the door and stood in it to say something to the air because I wanted to put kindness somewhere, and the only place I had was the cedar. The wind brought me other people's noises. A garbage truck finding its way in reverse, the rattle a chain link gate makes when a hand doesn't mean it. There are endings people tell themselves. They say fix one thing and the world will hand you a list. They say give a name to a hurt and the hurt will mind itself. They write instructions in small letters and believe small letters keep the debt down. I did all of that and it got me one last day of the world I recognize. And that has to be fair enough because the other choice is no day at all. There are days when the door doesn't hold and I close it and it holds. There are nights when the latch whispers and I lie still and it goes back to being a latch. There is a line on the wall where a slip was and isn't, and I stand sometimes with my hand up to it, like a man measuring his partner on a kitchen doorway where chips show the best years. Inside the seventh wall, something ticks when the light goes off and names the seconds a way I don't know. I do not give it anything else. When I'm tired, I walk to the sink and back, and I do it once. If you stand in my living room and stare at the floor, you can see the places where I taught it my steps. A dark track curves to the kitchenette, and another to the door, and another to the corner where the screws live. I will sand those soon and lay a coat down on them and ask them to stop telling on me. Maybe I'll get the right screws and drive them through that panel into a block that never moves. Maybe I'll carry the seventh wall out to the pile and set it on its side and let it get rained on until the glue gets back to what it pretends to be. If you come, which you won't, a piece of pallet will prop the door open the thickness of a hand, and the heater will be off, and the fridge won't sing any songs at all. The north wall will have a clean place where a slip doesn't go, and the tape will curl on itself, because curling is what it learned when I asked it to keep things down, and one day it didn't have to. The hard candy will be there in the box, with the plastic looking like ice. Take one. Chew it until it breaks. Tell me how old it tastes. Tell me what you would fix before it gets dark. Then don't. Sit, listen to the yard do its work and count how many screws hold the room together, because that's the number you can live with. If this story lands with you, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who enjoys quiet, literary horror. Comments are open. Tell me your favorite image or line.